Hi everybody and welcome to Fauxropter. My name is John Dutton. I'm a creative brand strategist with Montreal advertising agency Camden.
I actually heard it was international now.
It is international. I happen to work in the Montreal office.
Well, that's very good because I also live here. I went to McGill in Montreal. I have a couple degrees and I'm Bobbie Gaucher.
Well, pleased to meet you, Bobbie.
Well, let's do a podcast,
All
John.
right. We just happened upon a microphone and now we're doing a podcast. If you want to know exactly what Fauxropter is all about, you can go back and listen to our teaser episode. It's very short, but basically we're calling it refocused curiosity. So we're looking at words that you think you know what they mean, and we're just sort of exploring what they might also mean to people, right?
Exactly. Like the way we use words, how we're misusing them consistently and constantly.
And not from the perspective of the dictionary definition, like, oh, you're using irregardless wrong or some silly
I don't know how to use that word.
Right, but that's not what we're talking about. We're really just talking about people think that they know what a word is, but actually there's some sort of extra meaning to it. That maybe the kids are using it like this, or maybe politicians use it a certain way and that kind of thing.
Or maybe it used to be used one way, but it's changed in the last 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, and that it might be surreptitiously changing. Mm-hmm. That's what's sort of interesting about it.
I have a really good example of one.
Do
you want to do it?
Let's do it.
Identity.
All right. Identity is a great word to start with because it enables us to tell the listeners a little bit about ourselves. For example, my son asked me the other day whether I considered myself more Canadian or Quebecois, because we're in Montreal, in the province of Quebec, which is in a country called Canada. In answering that question, it took me about 10 minutes to answer his question.
Also, as everybody can hear, you have a British accent. So it's ludicrous that you were asked if you identify as Canadian or Quebecois, because anybody who would look at you and hear you would say that you're obviously British. So what does it mean to misidentify someone, and does it matter?
Mm-hmm, exactly. Because I decided to leave England. It doesn't mean I left my English identity behind.
It sounds like you did.
Obviously, I'm in many regards English. I think it would, especially with regards to football.
Yeah, but even there, like, do you identify as an English soccer fan or strictly a Liverpool fan?
Strictly Liverpool.
Absolutely. All other English soccer is garbage.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it is. So it's what's interesting in the context of Montreal, and we are beyond the city, province, and country question, there's a language question too. So in Montreal, you're either Anglophone or Francophone, meaning that your native language is either English or French, right? And obviously mine is English. Yours is English too, although you have a French name, so it's a little bit more complicated.
It's fantastic.
So before I start waffling on about this, how about your identity, Bobbie? What's your background?
Oh, before I even get into that, it's interesting that we're going to have a conversation about how we identify, but I'm a little less than you, but we're very privileged that we get to choose our identity, and it's not something that you clearly see and remark on right away. Mm-hmm. Like, a person of color doesn't get to choose their identity. Mm-hmm. They have an identity, and everybody identifies them immediately with it. Or someone who doesn't speak the same language as us. But, like, there's very obvious ones, and as two white people, we have a huge privilege that we get to choose. And, like, 10 years ago, nobody cared about anybody's identity. I remember I was there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's issues around identity that we're not going to touch on today, like the pronouns. We might do an episode on that at one point. Mm-hmm. That's all very interesting, and gender and all this kind of thing. Super interesting stuff. But this is very, very basic identity in terms of, like, I'm a Canadian. I'm a Canadian, eh?
I would identify myself as Canadian. Definitely a Montrealer. Quebecer, not Quebecois. Uh-huh. Never. And then, like, a young, cool woman.
Right.
That's how I identify.
Okay. And you don't have any interesting ethnic identity that you want to share with us?
Well, I'm mixed, but you can't tell that I'm mixed.
Right. You certainly can't tell on the podcast.
Oh, I know. My dad's half black and my mom's Irish. So, like, I grew up with a black family. I really thought I was black until I realized I was a white kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like 8. And I was like, oh no, I have to start all over. What does it mean to be the little white kid at school, not the little black kid at school?
Mm-hmm.
But now, like, I just find it more respectful to pass and be quiet about my identity because I have the privilege of passing.
Yes, you've raised a good point about privilege there. And obviously these are never-ending discussions. And a lot of it does come down to individual preference and that kind of thing when you haven't had something imposed on you.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, just to briefly go over the answer I gave to Sasha was, I think I consider myself almost like a Montrealer first and foremost because I chose this city. Like you choose a city to live in more than a country if you have chosen somewhere, if you're not still in the place that you were born in.
Mm-hmm. I think that's very fair to say. And like, if I was going to move anywhere, like I've thought about moving out west, I wouldn't identify as, oh, I was born in BC. I forgot. I don't identify as British Columbian.
Right.
But maybe like if I moved to Vancouver and like the specific example is Vancouver Island, people love that island and like identify with it. Like, oh, I was on the island.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, I get it.
Yeah. Islanders are sort of special people, aren't they? I think. Like mountain people as well.
Well, it's very interesting in Newfoundland that you're from away. That's another like very interesting identity that they can recognize immediately. Oh, they're from away.
Yes. So obviously your identity that you describe, I don't mean you, I mean people. It also, there's you're excluding others, right? You're othering people, right? You're defining other people as being not you as well. If you're saying something like you're from away, obviously that's.
Mm-hmm. And like even so, like we've identified ourselves. I keep forgetting things that I guess I am. Like I'm from BC.
Mm-hmm.
There's other stuff. I guess I didn't say it was mixed up front, but like that's a strange thing. And like I notice it very often, and people kind of ask like I look white, but I don't look stereotypically white. So people ask, they're like, no, but what are you?
Mm-hmm.
Or like the best is when I hear people ask, and it's so cringeworthy. No, but where are you from?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, from here. And it's like, no, but where are you from?
Really from?
Yeah,
right.
It's
the
offensive.
The subtext is you're not really white.
Yeah,
right. That's the real question.
You can't be from here.
Yeah,
you're not white.
And people will ask that question in. Maybe in the US, in Canada, in England, for sure, people ask that question, and they've been kind of like educated to try not to ask that question.
Yeah, and even like that question's polite.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying really hard to be polite,
but
it's god awful to listen to. And Quebecois are especially good about it because they're very blunt. They're like, no, but what are you?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh.
Yeah, and since we are not French Canadian Quebecois, we're not. There's no need for us to speak on the behalf of that community either, but like that's a whole very touchy subject in Quebec for very real historical reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't even need to go there because there's plenty more in the world to talk about.
Oh, that's a whole season.
That would be a whole season, and again for very important reasons. But you know, some people will here is a place where people truly identify by their language, whereas in England, I suppose it's like it's just a given, right? Or in France, it's like a given. You speak French, and that's it. There's no need to.
Well, I think we're really lucky to be in a bilingual like city for sure, but even the entire province. Like I've always felt that it gave me something that I think someone from Ontario, maybe somebody from England doesn't have, that I get to understand two cultures immediately because they're constantly clashing.
Yeah.
So I understand, like, I'm kind of a little bit more patient.
Right.
And I know, like, I was in the UK and someone didn't speak English and I just heard an English person just speak louder and louder to be like, no, I'm saying this. And I was like, no, they don't understand.
Right.
You're not getting anywhere by speaking louder.
Yeah.
So I feel really, like, lucky to have that.
And you touched on something interesting when you said different cultures, because language and culture aren't the same thing either, right?
Oh, yeah.
The culture, people speak French here and they speak French in France, and it's not the same culture. It just clearly isn't. And you know, because there's plenty of people who have immigrated from France, and they have a different culture, that's for sure, right? You can speak French and come from Morocco and you have a different culture. So there's these things obviously overlap. It's all very interesting, and we're not here to point fingers at anybody doing anything wrong. That's not the point. The point is to kind of like just say how multidimensional this thing can be. Just look at you. You sat there going, I'm this, and then you realize there was a bunch of other dimensions, right? And I didn't even, like I said, we're not even going to start talking about gender because that's a whole different episode.
We haven't even touched on religion either.
Exactly. You could have exactly. You could have a cultural background where you're from an Arabic country, but your religion is Islam, right?
They're not synonymous, right? Like,
right. Or you could be Muslim from Indonesia, right?
Mm-hmm. And there are like certain groups and classes of people that they won't let them be anything else. So what I've learned is I'm very privileged, very happy about that privilege, and I'm happy I chose Montreal.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And me too. I guess the interesting question for me would be if I ever moved somewhere else, I wouldn't be able to say, would I still be able to say I'm a Montrealer? Because I've certainly lived here far longer than anywhere else. Like I'd have to live to be a ripe old age to have lived somewhere else longer.
I think like it's so interesting because I never have to explain my identity. Like I don't formally introduce myself and I'm like, hi, I'm Bobbie Gaucher. I am these 5 things. Mm-hmm. But if you think about when you travel, like whenever I'm overseas, I specifically say I'm Canadian. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I'm not from the States. Yeah, I'm Canadian.
That's a known thing, isn't it? That's the maple leaf flag on the backpack syndrome.
It's the best. Your bag never gets stolen.
Right. So, okay, I feel like this episode is actually probably a little longer than the average episode length because it's episode 1, and I think it's okay to go a little bit more in depth.
I have a question, a final question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you were just in Ireland.
I was.
When you introduced yourself to people, did you say, "Oh, I'm from Montreal," or did you say, "Hi, I'm John from Yeovil"?
No, I definitely didn't say that. But if it came, I probably didn't say I'm from anywhere when I just said hello to people. But if people asked, I would definitely say I was from Montreal.
Or Canadian.
Yeah, if they said, are you English or are you Irish? I would say I'm Canadian. I definitely would say I'm Canadian. No, I'd explain it. I'd be like, I'm Canadian, but I grew up in England.
Well, you have the entire pint to explain it, so it's fine.
Yeah, there's plenty of... And if it takes 2 pints...
Then it takes 2 pints.
What's the problem? There's no problem there. As many pints. So if there's one thing we've decided today, it's that as many pints as it takes. That's what identity is all about.
Mm-hmm. You can explain it over 1 pint or over 6 pints.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Bobbie.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll be back soon.
If you have any questions, feel free to email us, or if you have any comments about the word we've discussed, let us know.
Yeah, this is all about conversations, and the contact information is in the show notes. All right, bye.
Bye.